On a show like Queer Eye on Netflix, how does the casting director know what to look for in the person who will get their life flipped around by the Fab Five?
Oh God, we had a woman who was obsessed with poop emojis, and it was just poop emojis. It's those little nuances. It's not just like my closet's a mess.
And where does an Academy Award-winning special effects makeup artist look for inspiration?
And sometimes it's an old person who has great skin or terrible skin. Sometimes the sun damage is just like, oh wow, how do I simulate that sun damage?
And could the costume designer for Schitt's Creek ever go too far with the bold and, dare I say, audacious look of Moira Rose?
You couldn't.
Well, all right, I'm Kyone Wolf. Come backstage with me for the second installment in our Behind the Scenes series. That's next on Audacious, right after the news. From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. With the world the way that it is, it's no wonder that we spend so much of our time watching television and movies. From sci-fi flicks like Star Trek, to unscripted reality shows like Queer Eye, to comedy dramas like Schitt's Creek, we are basking in the very best distractions. And while the actors tend to take center stage, as it were, today you'll enjoy the second installment of a series in which we honor the folks who make the magic happen behind the scenes. I mentioned Star Trek, Queer Eye, and Schitt's Creek for a good reason. Later, you'll meet the Academy Award-winning special effects makeup artist who brought some of those surreal Star Trek characters to life. And you'll get to know the casting director who not only chose all the folks who got transformed during each episode of Queer Eye, she helped find the Fab Five, who host this most recent iteration of the show. But first, Schitt's Creek, which, if you've been living in a pop culture hole for the past year, is spelled SCHITT''S Creek, is a Canadian show known and celebrated for a lot of things. Its representation of LGBTQ characters, its stellar writing and acting, and, of course, its costume design. But let's back up. For those who are new to the Creek, the affluent Rose family are suddenly penniless, defrauded by their business manager. In the very first episode, you watch them breathlessly pack their valuables as they're being evicted from their ornate mansion. Johnny Rose, his two adult children David and Alexis, and his wife, former daytime soap opera actress Moira, flee to live in a motel in a town that Johnny once bought as a joke, called Schitt's Creek. And that's where the 6 seasons of this Emmy Award-winning series takes place. Even if you're barely familiar with this show, when you visualize the characters, you probably most vividly imagine its larger-than-life matriarchal figure, Moira Rose. You have Deborah Hanson to thank for that image of actress Catherine O'Hara wearing a mostly black and white designer wardrobe with bold accessories, including, of course, a roster of wigs, which is a stunning contrast with the rest of the folks in the sleepy town of Schitt's Creek, who tend to rock flannel, jeans, and t-shirts. There's a lot to unpack there, and if I had multiple hours with Deborah Hanson, I'd ask her about every single character's style, but in my limited time, I focused mostly on how she created the singular Moira Rose.
Oh, I have to admit to it being quite easy. Catherine, Dan Levy, and myself all kind of hit on the same visual idea to follow for Moira. We all had the same references, and basically it was about Daphne Guinness.
Yeah, she's an English fashion designer and socialite she's known for her signature platinum and black striped hair and striking shoes and accessories.
And we follow that look and that feeling to the very end. You know, we talked about her being a confident woman, a bold woman, assured, completely conceptual in her mind, and unique, original, smart, strength, everything. She just epitomized what we thought Moira would aspire to. If she wasn't, she was going to aspire to that, right? And that kind of individual, confident style. And Catherine had spoken to Dan about it. Dan agreed to speak to me about it first, and I totally laughed when he said, because my library has 2 or 3 books on her. I knew a lot about her. And so we could follow through on that. And we weren't copying. I mean, gosh, couldn't afford it, her clothes. But Dan set some very clear guidelines as far as he didn't want us to mimic fashion or designers. He wanted original pieces, and he wanted us to only use. So it didn't look like a McQueen. It was a McQueen. So with our very limited budget, and it was a very small budget, it's a small Canadian show, it was pretty tricky to do. Yes, we went to all the consignment stores and vintage stores, but we started online. And so I'd send something to Dan, he'd send something to me, we'd back and forth and put this together. But we bought, throughout the 6 seasons, we just trolled those section. And we had some people who donated clothing to us. And occasionally, and very occasionally, we would rent something like purses, for instance, because they were so extraordinarily expensive that we couldn't even buy very many of them online on sales.
Did you ever go too far with Moira's look?
You couldn't. I honestly say that because there were times when we'd sit back and go, it's not far enough. It's really too good. It just doesn't push the point that she would do. She always has to go one step beyond what is not acceptable, because everybody accepted everything that she wore. But no, we would push it. And sometimes it was what it became sometimes was really the layering of the jewelry, which was all costume jewelry, right? There was no good pieces there at all.
That reminds me, I think it's clear that Moira finds great comfort in her clothes as sort of, like evidence of the life she used to lead and a connection to her long gone wealth and sense of security. So that being said, I'd like to hear about the thought process that went into how often she sleeps wearing a vest and a brooch. Where did that idea come from?
That came from a fitting that we were doing. And we had beautiful silk, men's pajamas for her. And she put them on and they looked beautiful. And I said, it's just not enough, is it? And then I thought of all those like 30s films. And you used to see women lounging around. And they also kind of in the menswear, they would wear vests and like Marlene Dietrich. And I went, So I went and I had my own stock there, and I had some period vests there, and I grabbed one and I said, let's try this. And we loved it. And I said, well, you would just take it off when you went to bed. And Catherine said, oh no, I'm sleeping this in case somebody wakes me up and I have to do something. I have to look right. And I said, still not enough. So I said, oh, look at this one. I grabbed another vest and it had this brooch of mine on it. And I just put it on to see the vest, and the brooch was there. And we went, oh, this is it. This is it. And I said, well, you'll still have to take it off. And she said, no. Sleep in my jewelry. Maybe these are the only real pieces of jewelry she has. She's taken them to bed because if anything happens, it's leaving with her. And I thought that made complete sense. There's always a logic to it, right? So when we did those brooches, we always made sure that they had a nice look to them, that they maybe were vintage or real pieces. They were hidden in her junk jewelry away from the
authorities.
The authorities, meaning the police.
Now, one other question that comes up a lot, especially for David and Moira, is why is their color palette black and white? Why did you make that decision?
I think that basically goes back to the Daphne Guinness to start with, right? And we wanted to put her in an environment where small town people didn't dress like that. They wore a bit of color, but it's a much more work clothes than hers. So there was a lot of thought there, and we stuck with it. It became who they were, but we broke it up. I was looking at the other day, somebody sent me like a million pictures in this, like everything she wore from season and I went through it, and we did add color, and I did want to do that. We use a lot of gold, if you think of gold as a color, and silver as accents, but we did have some color in her, and I think that was important, and I pushed that a little bit, that maybe once a season we see there's a Balmain or a Balanchier, I'm not sure, colored skirt. There's definitely a fire colored orange one and black that's a McQueen. Sometimes it's a piece of red or color in the jewelry. We used a blue, but very, very little, just to say that she's bold enough to do that, or she's open enough to do that. And it has to be in the form true still to her style. But we did introduce it, and I think it gives a little break to people. And then when she comes back in another black and white, oh God, yes, there she is again,
Let's talk about how you have to collaborate with other people who are adorning these actors. So let's talk about wigs. I am legally required to ask you about the wigs. In the very beginning of the first episode of this whole show, when the Rose family are frantically packing up everything they own while being evicted from their mansion, we get our first look at Moira's wigs, all of whom, of course, have names.
My very soul has been kidnapped. There's no ransom. No one's coming to save me.
We've got 15 minutes to collect our personals. Can we pick up the pace?
No, did you put Kristen with Robin? They don't like each other. No.
These wigs ranged from pink to green to red to black to white. They're curly, they're frazzled, they're straight, they're blown out. They are, to me, the cherry on top of Moira, literally and figuratively, because she could probably also pull off having a cherry-inspired wig. Talk about the power of the wigs on Moira Rose.
The power of the wigs is extraordinary, and Anya and the hair and makeup people work separately from my department and from me, but we collaborate. As soon as we had the fittings done, and even before we chose a particular outfit, we would send those photographs across the way or go over and see them and visit them. And during the fittings, quite often, Catherine would say, "Oh, I think the wig should be," and they would discuss that. And then they would try things and send them back to myself and Dan so that everybody agreed to what they were. And they would shock and surprise me at times, and it was such a delight. But they followed through. The clothing came first, and then makeup and hair came in and just enhanced everything.
I'm sure you hear most about Moira and David, but what other characters do you have an affinity for whose clothing choices aren't in the spotlight as much as you wish they were?
I actually think it's not about fashion, but I think it's really good design, and that's Emily Hampshire.
Emily Hampshire, she played Stevie Budd, the concierge and eventual owner of the hotel where the Rose family was living. Yeah.
Yes. Because she wears the same thing but different, but there's a story about her, and it's very, very subtle. The talk when she has a dress on, when she goes to one of the parties and we were putting a dress on her, what would it be? Or when she was out of that hotel and just her, her t-shirt and her jeans, and what choices. They were really difficult. And when I got it right, Emily would start to cry, which I love. Every designer loves it when cry in a good way.
Yeah.
In a really good way. I think Alexis, Annie, was the most difficult to do.
Yep. Annie, who played Alexis, the very stylish daughter of the Rose family.
Yeah. And that's because she had to look like the it girl. She had to look stunning, which is not difficult to do for her. But she's a character that has her mother's influence. She has all her it girl friends' influence. She travels internationally. She had money, but she had no confidence, right? Her style is not as defined and clear and confident as her mother's or as David's. And so she never, until the very end, starts, and when she gets a job, right? And she's doing really well at it. She goes to the red carpet and she's running that red carpet, and, she has a gold Yves Saint Laurent, and she looks fabulous, but she feels great. And she chose that. That's what she wanted, I think. And for me, that was a beautiful, beautiful, interesting design journey, because we had the most difficult time with her. We had clothes up the woohooza, to put on her, and everything fit. There was never that issue, but it was always, it doesn't feel right, or let's try this one. And it really had to have its own individual story that came from, this is what I was like, this is what I want to be like, this is who I think I am, this is who I am.
Did you get to keep anything?
No.
No.
Some of the things were mine, not very much. But,
Is there any outfit? Now, I won't ask you which was your favorite outfit in the series because that's cruel, but which one made your heart skip a beat when you pulled it off?
Moira going to find David when he was with the Amish. We had these, I think they're Balenciaga, these strange looped tights, but I knew it needed something more. And so that was when the hat came in, and we just put it together. And when she came in and we did a final fitting, we just went, oh, it's good. Part of that whole creation was it needed balance with Dan. He was in the harder with the Mohawk piece, which, and that was Dan. I take no credit for that at all. He said, look at this, Deborah. And I went, oh my God. But I knew I had to balance that look with his mother. And actually, she made him look more real in a sense, because the two of them were out there. It wasn't just him alone in the field with the Amish going, what have we done by letting this man have? But, it was all about contrast with their simplicity. So that costume I'm very proud of. It's still, when I see it, I love it. I love it.
Do you miss them?
Yes, I miss the actors a lot, because after 6 years and of doing such intense work, because even though it was a comedy, that work was incredibly intense. To make it not comedy, to make it real for each one of those characters. And they were incredibly brave, collaborative people. How can you not love those people? I mean, my job is basically to help them be real, to help them create their characters and feel comfortable and real. This is what Alexis is going to wear running today. She's going to go to her closet and she's going to choose this, right? Or she's going on this date, Emily. I want to impress them like this. And if they feel that is what it isn't something that they put on, or I'm saying, here, this is what I, the designer, am doing, and it's right, and so just do it. It's not. The word collaboration is what it is, and that's why you miss it, because it is rare. It is not something that you get all the time. And I think everybody felt it and was confident with it. And if they didn't like something, they could tell me. I didn't, you just move on. You skin the cat 50 ways, right?
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything that I missed that you want to make sure you say about your work in costume design on Schitt's Creek?
No, I'm just really happy that people have reacted so well to this show visually, but the message. I mean, that's what is amazing about this show, is that it has a message for us all. No matter what you look like, where you live, kindness and consideration for others is what's the most important thing. And to be inclusive, everybody knew what Dan and Eugene thought was important, and everybody felt really good. So yeah, I'm really proud of it.
Well, Deborah Hanson, costume designer for Schitt's Creek, thank you so much for talking with me.
You're very welcome.
When we get back, how did the casting director for Queer Eye pick the Fab Five in the first place? Plus,
there's a whole character in just the hair, and getting that right is crucial.
Take a masterclass in special effects makeup. And what's the market rate for a realistic looking head these days? I'm Kyone Wolf. Find out on Audacious, right after the break. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. Today is the second installment of our series celebrating folks who work behind the scenes of your favorite movies and shows. Later, you'll meet the casting director for Queer Eye and find out what they're looking for in the people that the Fab Five work their magic on. But first, if it wasn't for Barney Berman, the 2009 movie Star Trek by J.J. Abrams probably wouldn't look the way it does. He won an Academy Award for his special effects makeup on that film, and you've seen his work on Arrested Development, Grimm, Medium, Planet of the Apes, Mission Impossible 3, and Pirates of the Caribbean, just to name a few. Now, it's important to know that Barney comes from a long line of special effects makeup artists. The family business started with his grandfather, Ellis Berman Sr. He was a pioneer in film makeup, having worked on productions like the original Twilight Zone series and the Wolfman movie. Along with his father, his brother, and his uncle, he's been keeping the Berman family tradition of special effects makeup alive in the entertainment industry. And now, Barney's released the first movie that he's written, directed, produced, and acted in, Barney Berman's Wild Boar, available on Amazon. It features compelling visuals such as decapitated heads rotting in a pool, the gutting of a human body, and lactating boar nipples. So brace yourself when you look it up. But what exactly does it mean to do special effects makeup? I asked Barney to define what he does.
I mean, in short, I'm a makeup artist. And the stuff that I do is stuff that people have been doing for decades. But it's now come to be termed as special makeup artist or special effects makeup artist, or some people just call it special effects, which I take issue with because special effects does practical stuff, bullet hits and wind and rain and things floating through the air. That's special effects. Our visual effects will do the digital conversion of those things. And then makeup effects became makeup effects because sometimes it wasn't really makeup, sometimes it wasn't really props, it wasn't really special effects, it was all this sort of weird amalgamated thing, like bodies melting. But now I literally got called one time to go do scratches from a dog attack on Woody Harrelson, and they called me a special makeup effects artist. Yeah.
Now, if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk about your movie, Barney Berman's Wild Boar.
Of course I want to talk about the movie. I've been talking about it a lot lately, and I love talking about it, actually.
There is a part of Barney Berman's Wild Boar, I'm just going to keep saying the name of the film over and over again, available on Amazon, where there's a pool of water with severed heads floating in it, one of which is a slain character whom we've gotten to know earlier in the movie. And you see this severed head in this water revealed by the woman who finds it, his girlfriend. And you see that part of his face was submerged in water. And so like half of his face looks soggy and waterlogged and gross. And the other half just looks, dead. So recognizable, right? And then she kisses him. Oh, there's so many moments of this movie. So if you would talk me through, generally speaking, how that head was made and what kind of research you have to do in situations like that to make it look realistic.
Well, can I first say I'm so glad that you described that head exactly the way it was meant to come across. I am always riddled with self-doubt, and I'm just thinking, did I do that right? Does it read right? Does it look wrong? Is there something? And so thank you for that. What was the question? Is that how we make the head?
And this is broadly speaking, how do you make a head? And did you have to research dead bodies and decomposition to make sure you got that right?
Well, I've over the years done a lot of research of dead bodies and decomposition, and so it's kind of in my brain. I don't necessarily need to continue looking at those things, and they bother me. The real stuff really bothers me.
That was another question. Yeah, if doing that sort of research on any sort of regular basis gets to you.
No, it sickens me. I get headaches and I feel queasy, but if I'm looking at it for the color or for the structure, I can remove myself and look at it that way. But once the reality of it hits, I do for maybe 10, 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden it's like, I gotta stop.
I want to talk about the art of what you do, and I'd like your reaction to an email from my brother, Michael Gladys. He's most famous, of course, for his role in Mad Men as Paul Kinsey, but he's also done a ton of stage and television, including a show on Adult Swim called Eagle Heart from 2011 to 2014. He played the very large chief of police, and
Actually, Barney, I visited him once during a taping of the show in LA, and it is likely that you and I met because I distinctly remember being in his trailer for like 3 hours as he got prosthetics on his face to make it look fatter.
I'm pretty sure we did meet because I remember your name. I remember him having a sister, and I remember, and I kept thinking, did we talk? Did we do this before? But no, I think you coming into the trailer is probably when what I'm remembering.
Yeah. And so when I told him that I was interviewing you, he wrote, "What fascinated me most about what you do was the airbrush makeup to blend it all together with my existing face. The layers of color, not just flesh tones, but undertones of rose, red, greens, and blues. It reminded me of when I got to examine a Rembrandt up close and marveled at how many different colors were present in the skin. I felt like I was getting an amazing lesson in painting." So what do you say to that email from my lovely brother?
You mentioned, or Michael mentioned, I guess, studying a Rembrandt up close. For me, my Rembrandt was TV, the old tube televisions, not digital monitors we have now, but the tube televisions. When I got up very, very close and looked at them, which you're not supposed to do because it hurts your eyes, grandmother will tell you, it's dots. It was little tiny colored dots. And a lot of blues and greens and reds. And I thought, wow, this is mostly not black, not white, not primary colors that you think they are. And that's how I learned to paint. I thought if I can dot those colors in one at a time in layers and then just sort of blanket it with a fleshy tone.
Whatever that flesh is.
Yeah. That became sort of my go-to formula for painting someone's face, and it has yet to let me down.
Do you think because you have to pay so much attention to the minutia in a human face, among other body parts, when you're out and about, I guess maybe I should say, in the before times, when you were out and about encountering people and new faces, do you find yourself studying their faces? Is that like a default state for you, or is it something that kicks in only now and then?
I'm studying your face right now. I'm looking at the wonderful warmth in your cheeks and the olive tones, and you're just very lovely. You people are listening on radio can't see, and so I'm the fortunate one. But yes, I mean, before you asked that question, I was literally looking at you because I just talked about doing it. So I'm now looking at you thinking, how would I paint that face? Where would I find the life? But I do that with a lot of people, especially when someone strikes me. Sometimes they're exceptionally beautiful because they're just, I don't know, it's just aesthetically clean, and it's not about makeup they're wearing. It's just about the flush or the dark skin tones that are just incredibly beautiful to me. And sometimes it's an old person who has great skin or terrible skin. Sometimes the sun damage is just like, oh, wow, how do I simulate that sun damage?
After a movie or a show is done, do you get to keep the stuff you make?
Well, you can probably see over my shoulder, there's a guy in the background that's a character from Star Trek, and we did a display version of that character for J.J. Abrams. So there's one in his office, and then I have one in my office. So there's a thing I did as a practical joke, but it ended up being something that I just really love and have worn around from time to time for fun. And it's really just my own big head.
And for our radio audience, you are holding up a giant, perfect version of your own head.
Yeah. So when people tell me I've got a big head, I say, you're absolutely right. Here it is.
Now, when you were putting that beard together, you could just reference yourself right quick.
Yeah, we did. And a friend of mine named Denise Bear is like the best hair puncher. And I've known her since she was 14 years old. And she did all the hair work on this. But you can see like in the eyebrows are all punched one at a time, the eyelashes. And there's a whole character in just the hair. And getting that right is crucial.
I know that some of the work you do is also done in ways and in part with computerized special effects. So with that variable, what is the best case scenario for your industry, for what you do?
I mean, the best case scenario is that people continue to honor that, like I said, we're artists and we're there to make characters. We're character creators and we want to collaborate. And sometimes that takes some time and some money and some tests. And for producers to understand and respect that. Back in the day on The Exorcist, I think Dick Smith did 12 different versions of the little girl demon before they came up with what they came up with. Even on something like Tootsie, I believe they tried like for something like a year and a half to try in different makeups to find out what's the Tootsie's look before they said, yes, this is going to work. Now you get lucky, very lucky if you have a test or maybe two is almost not unheard of. So yeah, that's the best case scenario for people to understand and devote some time to invest in creating those characters.
This is my last question.
Oh.
If money were no object, and I wanted you to make a head of me like you have a head of you, how much would it cost for me to commission you to make a head of me?
How about if I answer it this way? Years ago, and this is some years ago, probably 10 at least, I asked different people what they would charge to make a fake head. And what's the baseline for making a fake head? Now, baseline means before hair, eyes are shut, so you don't have to put eyes in it. Mouth is closed, you don't have to put teeth in it. Baseline likeness of somebody before hair. The lowest someone said was $6,000, and the highest was $14,000. More recently, I asked some people. One studio quoted me $24,000.
This is full head?
Full, but that was like full hair, eyes, teeth, 100% lifelike thing. So that's a wide range. I always tried to be reasonable and keep my prices in a range, but maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have stood up and said, I'll tell you a quick story. My father and Stan Winston did Terminator and Aliens and Jurassic Park dinosaurs. And my father and Stan Winston were partners for a couple of years in the late 70s. And they were going in to see John Milius, the guy who wrote and directed Conan the Barbarian. So they were presenting themselves to do all the makeup effects for Conan the Barbarian. And they went in, they told them everything they were going to do. And John Milius said, all right, great. What's this going to cost me? And Stan Winston said, without talking about it to my dad first, Stan Winston apparently said, it's going to cost you $1 million. You've got the two best makeup artists in Hollywood. It's going to be the best makeup effects you've ever seen. And John Milius said, get the out of my office. So Stan had the nerve to push the envelope and say, we value ourselves this much. You should too. That's one of the things I've had trouble with. My father had trouble. Most people I know have trouble standing up and say, I'm worth more. And you better believe it and pay me more. And Stan ended up, getting to be a multimillionaire off making gigantic dinosaurs and things. He was a total success at it. So I now tell other people, raise your prices, raise your rates. It's better for all of us. And it will encourage you to do better work. It gives you a little padding to if you make a mistake, you can fix it. You can bring other people, whatever it is. Value yourself more. Eventually, other people will start to see you that way too.
Barney Berman, thank you so much for talking with me today.
All right, thanks so much.
Coming up next.
You also can't have 5 peacocks. You've got to have somebody who's maybe a little bit more of an observer. And when these 5 came together, it just worked.
How did the Fab Five on Queer Eye become the Fab Five? And if you want to be considered for a makeover on Queer Eye, what exactly is the casting director looking for? I'm Kyone Wolf. Find out after the break on Audacious. Stay with me. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. This hour, you're hearing the second installment of our celebration of those who work behind the scenes of your favorite movies and shows. Something happens to me every time I hear this theme song. That's from the Netflix series Queer Eye. And what happens to me is I get very excited and happy, and then I find the nearest tissue box and prepare to bawl my eyes out. It's complicated and wonderful. The idea behind Queer Eye is that you've got 5 lifestyle experts, the Fab Five, who specialize in fashion, cooking, grooming, interior design, and culture. And they are all, of course, on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. During each episode, they descend upon one lucky person who gets their inner and outer lives transformed by the team. And no matter how stoic you are, you're usually crying by the end of every episode. Queer Eye on Netflix is the new version of the 2003 series on Bravo, and it's been making people laugh and cry around the world for 6 seasons now. But none of this could have happened without the perfect people to embody the Fab Five, and the people deserving of an incredible life transformation. Danielle Gervais is the Emmy Award-winning Executive Vice President of Casting and Talent at ITV America. She leads the team that casts the lucky folks who get makeovers for the show and that chose the new Fab Five. I asked Danielle to tell me about how that critical process went.
So we had our 5 categories. We knew we needed to essentially search the country and find the best talent for each of those categories. We talked to thousands of people, interviewed thousands of people, and some incredible talent. Eventually, we were able to narrow it down, right, to a couple hundred, and then even further, and took the final group to LA. We overtook a hotel in Los Angeles, all of us. You can imagine what that was like.
Intense.
The very first night, we had just a cocktail thing where we wanted them to meet. We wanted everybody to get to know each other. And, you started to see kind of people gravitate to one another. And we watched everybody. And then, the next day we started to sit down with them and sort of build our 5 and then say, that didn't quite work. We've got to bring in somebody a little different. You also can't have 5 peacocks. There can't be 5 people talking over each other. You've got to have somebody who's maybe a little bit more of a listener, a little bit more of an observer. And when these 5 came together, it just worked.
Now, I imagine that there is always some sliver of faith that this will all work out. I mean, I guess that goes for all casting ever, that you research the people, you interview them, you see how their chemistry is. But when the lights and cameras go on, there must be some sort of suspended in air feeling of, I hope this works. Yeah. I mean, how do you make sense of that? How do you deal with that?
The pressure definitely was there. And I think we all felt it. And certainly, sure, it was a complete leap of faith. And to this day, we don't take that for granted. This many seasons in, every time we get the opportunity to do this again, and they get the opportunity to do this again, it feels, especially now, it feels like important work. Like we take it really, really seriously, all of us as a team, because it is a huge team effort. And we feel lucky, like we feel very grateful to work on this show.
I want to hear about how you choose the heroes, who are the people in each episode who get made over, or, as you've said, made better. There are 8 to 10 folks chosen per season, and this starts with a nomination process, yeah? What makes for a really great nomination? What makes your heart race as a casting director?
Excellent question. Getting these tips from nominators, I think, makes it feel so genuine, right? We do, by the way, occasionally have people that write in about themselves. And sometimes it works and it makes sense. And other times it feels a little forced. Whereas if you have somebody who is nominating someone who never would see it coming. There's that sense of surprise when they show up. They know they're coming, of course, but they don't realize, they don't know when, and they don't necessarily know why they've been chosen. That's really special. When you have somebody who's really unassuming, somebody who hasn't seen the show, and it's harder now, that's pretty great. Somebody who's not like a super fan when the guys walk in, it's more like, who the hell are these people? That's fun. And, somebody who is a story we've not gotten to tell, right? So we've told a lot of incredible stories through these people, and we're always looking to evolve each season and tell and present a new story. Somebody who is doing something special in their community or in their life, has an important journey that we want to share, and they are open to sharing. That's really important. Somebody that lets us in and really goes on the journey. I know that seems like obvious, but we talk to a lot of people who aren't quite ready to dive in and have really in-depth conversations with Karamo, right? Or like even open their closet to Tan. We need somebody who's sort of an open book.
I wonder what skills you engage when you got to make sure that this nominee is the person you're looking for. I mean, I make a living getting people to open up about sometimes really difficult stuff. But when you're interviewing a candidate, are there questions that you always ask, like standard questions? Or is it like free jazz, see where you go, see how they open up?
I think it's always both, right? And I'm somebody, I like to share the credit. My casting directors are so skilled. We always need to hit on the 5 categories. So what's your daily wardrobe look like? And it's always those nuances that we like to point out that, end up working. I remember, oh God, we had a woman who was obsessed with poop emojis, and she was in Philly, and it was just poop emojis. It's those little nuances. It's not just like my closet's a mess. It's more specific now. We love funny. We love just quirky, unexpected, funny bits. So we're always looking for those types of sort of funny things. But then, those interviews go all over the place because you never know. You think you've got the story. I'm sure you can relate to this. Like you think you know the story you want to tell. And then as you dive in, you realize there is so much more that you haven't even scratched that this person could potentially explore on their journey. And that happens, I would say 90% of the time.
To what degree are you looking for someone who's not necessarily disheveled, but someone who will likely result in a staggeringly different physical result at the end of the episode?
We love that, right? Like we love when you can say, oh my gosh, this person is going to look like a different human being at the end of this. And you can see it. Sometimes that's exactly what happens. And other times it's a little bit more subdued. The makeover itself, is a little bit more understated, but they themselves, it's all about like at the end of the day, like how are they feeling at the end of it? And you can just tell they walk differently. They carry themselves differently at the end. So we do definitely look for that though, because that's the fun, the fun of the show is to see those before and afters too. That's a huge piece. And again, tell stories that feel like they are going to resonate now.
And while, the physical transformation is really compelling, there's also a lot of transformations that are on the inside, this personal evolution. How much is that a factor?
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's huge. And if you feel that's what I'm saying. Like if somebody just doesn't feel ready to take that sort of journey, because it is a journey and it's intense, they've got to sort of open up fairly quickly. And so if someone's not quite there yet, it makes it incredibly difficult. So we always are looking for people that are ready.
Another tough thing to weed out would be someone who's really in it for the free house renovations, or the feeling of being on the spotlight of this powerful show. How do you anticipate or weed out those sort of ulterior motives?
Yeah, that's tricky. And it gets harder, right? With every season, because the show is more well-known. You start to have people that are kind of Fab Five fans and they want to meet them. And we've gotten pretty good. The team is pretty great at sussing out, who wants the free furniture. And it really comes down to, I think, those interviews, and you just have a gut check. And if it feels like they're giving you all of the right answers, sort of like tailor-made for an episode, that can be a bit of a flag for us. They like to do the dirty work, right? We like to dig in and find the story, not have it sort of laid out on a platter. That can be a little bit of a flag.
And I imagine you do social media and other background checks, which also give you a good sense of the personality of this person.
Exactly. And I think, the social media of it all, we have to look into that carefully just to make sure that there's not something there that we would be rewarding someone who, at the end of the day, shouldn't necessarily be rewarded.
When the glorious day has come and you have chosen your 8 or 10 people who will be heroes, how does that feel? Do you celebrate?
That's a good question. No one's ever asked that. And really, we do it obviously in lockstep with Netflix. And so you kind of choose as a committee, but it is like sort of picking your favorite children, right? Because you get attached to some of these folks. And so they all feel deserving. We put that work into those people because we feel like they would make for wonderful heroes. So in the end, when you have it, you're happy and you're relieved, of course, but you're also feeling like, oh gosh, if we could just go back to this place, go back to this city and do these two, then, so it's always a little bittersweet, I think, for the team. Yeah.
I wonder, since you have so much experience finding the people who will be the subjects of the show and weeding out folks who are either just not the right fit or who are interpreted as applying for more selfish reasons, do you think that you were drawn to this kind of work because you were already good at seeing through the nonsense? Or did this work make you better at seeking out people who are more authentic?
Yeah, I have a pretty good bullshit meter. Like, I feel like I can usually pick it up. I majored in journalism in school. I was going to be a reporter. That was going to be my job. But I will say there's a bit of journalism in the process, and I can appreciate that. I think doing what I've done in my career has definitely given me, I think, a little bit more of like, I can sort of suss out who feels a little more genuine and who doesn't. I've learned, but I had a little bit of that, I think, before I started. And as do people on my team, a lot of perceptive listeners. You're doing a lot of listening, making people feel comfortable. That's a big part of the job.
How often would you get someone who would hear what you do for a living and then they would change? Like they clearly want you to give them an opportunity now that they know what you do. Does that happen?
Yeah, there was a period where I wasn't telling people. I would just make up jobs. It happens, and it's always like, I know somebody that should have their own show. And the truth is, like, there's not many people that should have their own show. There really aren't. And but you always listen, I never say never. You never know. The truth is, I live in this world of, I can never pass up hearing a story because you never know. It could be that one thing that ends up being their own show. So at the same time, as much as you're sort of like, okay, tell me what it is, you do never know. And I'm always, my ears are open just in case.
Well, Danielle Gervais, Executive Vice President of Casting and Talent at ITV America, known especially for your and your team's work, bringing us the Fab Five and all the heroes of Queer Eye on Netflix. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you. It's been such a nice conversation, so thank you for having me.
Check out the first in this behind-the-scenes series of backstage interviews, including a conversation with Issa Rae's hairstylist, an intimacy coordinator, and the illustrator for the Great British Bake Off. That's at ctpublic.org/audacious, where you can also listen back to shows about things like stuttering and other speech disfluencies, what it's like making a living as a psychic, my first visit to a nudist resort, what it's like to be a world-famous meme, and what happens when you act like you belong in places where you definitely don't belong. That's ctpublic.org/audacious. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and leave a review in iTunes. Reviews are massively helpful in getting new folks to find the show. Audacious is produced by me and Katie Tolarski at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford. Send me your reactions and show ideas on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Kyone Wolf. And my email is cwolf@ctpublic.org. And online, use the hashtag AudaciousPublic. Thanks for listening.